Today, we're looking at something, frankly, pretty sobering. We've got a set of sources here that document some real-world tragedies directly linked to video gaming. And just to be clear, this isn't about, the usual debate over screen time or anything like that. No, not at all. We're looking at documented fatalities, real physical and legal friction points that happen when this deep digital immersion just collides with the physical world. That's exactly it. That's the mission. We've gathered cases from, 2005 to 2017? Yeah, all over the world, too. Asia, Europe, North America, right. And the incidents are surprisingly varied. We're talking about everything from physical collapse, from sheer exhaustion, to, lethal distractions and even game-inspired violence. The goal is to synthesize it all. And we're going to try and make sense of it by breaking it down into three core themes, three categories of risk. First, we have physiological failure. This is the marathon session that proves fatal. Then we'll get into environmental accidents. So, the dangers of distraction and full immersion. And finally, this one is wild. Real-world conflict, when digital arguments and virtual stakes trigger lethal physical consequences. These just the patterns are what's so striking. Yeah, these aren't just one-off stories. No, they really aren't. There are consistent mechanisms at play when human biology and, frankly, physical laws are just ignored. Okay, let's jump right into that first category then. Physiological failure. The cost of the marathon session. A lot of these seem to start in one particular place. They do, the internet cafe, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s. And I think the starkest early case has to be the Starcraft incident in South Korea. That was back in 2005. Yeah, 2005. We're talking about a 28-year-old Lee Sun-op who played Starcraft for nearly 50 hours straight. 50 hours, that's more than 2 full days without sleep. Witnesses said he barely moved. Just short breaks from the toilet, that's it. His eyes were bloodshot, he was slumped over, and then on the third day, he just collapsed. And the medical reason was just devastatingly clear. Cardiac arrest. It was triggered by a whole cocktail of things. Exhaustion, obviously, but also severe dehydration and critical blood clotting. Right, from the immobility. Can you unpack that mechanism for us? Sure. It's something called deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. When you sit still for that long, blood can pool in your legs and form clots. The real danger is when you finally stand up. The clot travels. Exactly, it can travel to your lungs and cause a fatal pulmonary embolism. And once you understand that, you start seeing it again and again in the sources. It's chilling, the repetition. We see it years later in China. 2007, a 26-year-old playing World of Warcraft. 3 straight days subsisting on instant noodles, he just slumped forward, no pulse. And then he in 2012, a 23-year-old, this time playing League of Legends. He'd been at it for nearly 23 hours. Other patrons saw him rub his chest, then he just slumped back in his chair, dead. And it's not just in Korea or China. We saw a case in the Philippines in 2015. A 17-year-old kid playing Minecraft for almost 3 days. Same exact pattern. He went limp, collapsed. Local doctors cited cardiac failure linked directly to that same combination of exhaustion and dehydration. So the takeaway here is the incredible consistency. Different games, different years, different cultures, same cause of death. Right, it's like the game fosters this psychological state, a flow state maybe, that's so intense it completely overrides the most basic survival instincts. The need for water, sleep, even just movement. I was going to ask, are all these chronic issues, like a slow decline? But your sources also point to a more acute risk. They do. And that brings us to the UK case from 2009, the Wii Fit incident. This one's different. It's not about sitting still. No, it's the opposite. A 25-year-old gets a Wii Fit for Christmas. The next day, Boxing Day, he goes at it. Exercises intensely for hours with no real conditioning. And then what happened? He later complained of chest pains, collapsed, and died. The cause was sudden cardiac arrhythmia. Doctors noted that, while it's rare, really strenuous activity can sometimes trigger that in young adults who aren't trained for it. So it's still a physiological failure, just a different tempo. Minutes of overexertion instead of days of neglect. Exactly. The truck driver. A 39-year-old man actively playing Pokémon Go while driving his truck. He hit 2 women, I remember reading. 2 elderly women. Yeah, 72 and 60 years old. They were crossing a railway intersection. Both died. The incident was so bad that the developer, Niantic, had to add specific warnings you couldn't skip. It really shows the central conflict of AR, right? You're asking people to split their focus between a screen and a world filled with Well, cliffs in traffic. And it wasn't just cliffs in traffic. In 2017 in the Philippines, a 12-year-old boy was hunting for creatures near a construction site. Oh no. He climbed a metal structure to get closer to whatever he was chasing, and he got too close to overhead power lines, touched a live cable, died instantly. The distraction just led him somewhere he would never normally go. Precisely. And then you have the flip side of this, which is full sensory deprivation with virtual reality. VR. This is where the danger comes from inside your own home. Yes. The 2017 incident in Moscow is a really defining early example of this. A 44-year-old man at home, fully immersed in his VR headset. He completely lost his bearings. Totally. He stumbled and crashed directly into a glass table, which shattered. The sources say he had deep cuts to his head and neck. And because he was alone and, totally disoriented by the VR, he bled to death. His own safe domestic space was weaponized against him by the Immersion. So if we look at this whole category, the issue isn't really the game's content. It's the elimination of awareness. Exactly. Whether it's AR making you walk off a cliff or VR making you crash into your own furniture, the focus required by the game fundamentally clashes with self-preservation. Okay, this next category, I found this one particularly disturbing because the conflicts start over things that legally didn't even exist for a long time. Right. We're now in our third category, conflict, crime, and virtual stakes. And this goes all the way back to 2005 in China, the Lineage 2 incident. It's all about the value of virtual property. It really is. You have two friends. One of them sells the other's powerful virtual sword, a dragon saber, for about $1,000 US. And the owner of the victim, he goes to the police. He does, but the police refuse to act. At the time, Chinese law didn't recognize virtual items as property, so no crime had been committed in their eyes, which must have been infuriating for him. Well, it escalated. He confronted his friend in person. The argument turned physical. He pulled a knife and stabbed him to death. Wow. So the violence wasn't even about the game itself, but about the legal vacuum. The item was real enough to kill for, even if the law said it wasn't real. That's the core of it. And if that's the starting point, the stakes only got crazier with the rise of swatting. This is a truly modern and horrific form of online conflict. We saw it in the Call of Duty community with that fatal case in the US in 2017. Swatting it's a terrible prank. You falsely report a massive crime like a hostage situation at your opponent's address to get a SWAT team sent there. It's weaponized terror. And in this case, in Wichita, Kansas, an argument over a tiny wager, $150, led one player to tell another to swat his opponent. But the swatter, a guy named Tyler Barreras, used the wrong address, an old address. So the house they sent the police to belonged to a completely innocent man, Andrew Finch. He had nothing to do with any of it. Nothing. Police surround the house believing there's a hostage taker inside. Finch opens his door, totally confused, and an officer, thinking he was reaching for a weapon, shot and killed him. Just unbelievable. An innocent man dead over a $150 video game argument. Barreras got 20 years for that. It's just an extreme example of how a minor digital conflict can create irreversible, tragic consequences for a total bystander. And it's not just about property or wagers. The sources also show clear cases of, game-inspired homicides. The Grand Theft Auto case in Thailand from 2008 is a classic example. An 18-year-old high school student hailed a taxi, stabbed the driver, and later confessed he just wanted to know what it felt like to hijack a car in real life. Because of the game, he got life in prison, and they pulled the game from shelves in Thailand for a while. Then you have the more immediate heat-of-the-moment rage. China, 2010, two guys arguing over Counter-Strike strategy in an internet cafe. It spills outside, becomes a fistfight, and one of them grabs a knife and kills the other. And finally, that just devastating Halo case from Ohio in 2007. Yeah. A 16-year-old, Daniel Petrick, his parents took away his copy of Halo 3. They thought he was addicted. So he retrieved the game and his father's gun. And when they got home, he shot them. He killed his mother and wounded his father, and then even tried to frame his father for it. So the unifying theme here seems to be how quickly the stakes, a virtual sword, an online argument, a feeling of loss, can just explode into real-world violence. Severe, permanent, and often fatal real-world violence. That's the takeaway. So we've really covered the whole spectrum today. From the slow physiological collapse in internet cafes due to exhaustion and DVT to the acute dangers of distraction with AR and VR, losing all sense of your physical surroundings. And finally, to this shocking jump from digital disputes to actual homicide, whether it's over virtual property or weaponizing the police. This deep dive really shows that the connection between high-intensity gaming and these tragedies, it's not just one thing. It's a spectrum of risk that shows up as physiological stress, environmental ignorance, and real-world conflict. And that really leaves a crucial question for you, the listener, to think about. Yeah, we talked about that Lineage 2 case where the police wouldn't act because a virtual sword wasn't legally property. So, given how much the value of digital assets has exploded since then, with NFTs and massive in-game economies, should our modern legal systems finally formally recognize and protect virtual property? Because the sources prove that disputes over these items are already more than powerful enough to incite lethal real-world violence. Yeah, it's a fundamental challenge. How does the legal system handle the consequences of assets that only exist in the digital world? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this essential deep dive. We'll see you next time.